Aarti, Rajaratnam, to you first. What is a negative body image and where does this negative body image in adolescent girls come from?
Sarah, let me just start with helping us understand that each of us perceives ourselves in a certain way. And how I perceive my body is what is generally referred to as body image. This can be positive in some people, but by and large, you'll notice that, with a lot of negative messaging coming in the last several years, it's become negative. So basically what happens is the person has normal physical appearance, but they tend to perceive it as being flawed, which is where it becomes a negative body image. And over a period of time, this can become what is called body dysmorphic disorder in some people because they're so obsessed with these perceived flaws, which may be very, very small. But in the overall sense, they're unable to take their focus away and develop other interests or relationships. And their entire world is built around how their body looks or how they perceive themselves to be. Right? In terms of how it's developed, of course, there's negative messaging right from day one. And in the adolescent years, already the child's brain, the teenager's brain, doesn't have such easy access to the thinking part. It's sort of driven almost entirely by the limbic system or the emotional part of the brain. And if you look at a lot of advertising that is targeted at this in this age group, it's what we call the implicit advertising, which is targeting the emotional centers, not so much the thinking centers. And therefore, the adolescent girls, and if I may add, I'd like to also make it gender neutral. Boys also go through this.
Yes,
I know
absolutely.
the campaign is more for girls, but I'd also like you to understand that boys also go through this, and it's even more difficult for people to understand when it's a boy who's going through it. So the adolescent years are very, very crucial because a lot of identity-related aspects are developed at this time, and it's important for us to understand as adults that we can't allow this kind of negative messaging to go across to them.
आरती, मेरा सवाल आपसे, what are the kind of body images issues you have dealt with in your daily practice? And why do adolescent girls buy into the negative body image so much more than the positive body image?
So in terms of a practice, when you, as a psychologist for over 22 years now, it was not so bad before the advent of the tabs. Now with access to social media, we find a lot more people accessing help. But if you really look at the most common concerns, one is to do with the color of the skin. And since I work in South India, it's much more pronounced. And I'd like to add here, some of our Tamil movies in the 80s had beautiful brown-skinned heroines, and they were really beautiful in that sense. And now, if you notice, most of our actresses are not from the South. We've actually outsourced that entire department to people from the North. Nothing against anybody, but we seem to be looking up to people with a totally different skin tone and skin color. And when I work with the villages in South India, I find a lot of young girls trying to be that, and it's almost impossible, right? Because the access to products also for them is very limited. That's one. The second area that we sort of work with is the fat shaming, the body shaming that is associated with the excessive fat in the body. But since we're focusing a lot on the color of the skin, I'd also like to quote a small example. Recently, I was working with a young boy, and I'm mentioning this specifically because I think somewhere we are very skewed when we are addressing this issue only from adolescent girls. So the boy's mother keeps telling him, wash yourself, use a lot more soap, then you'll become fairer. And the poor fellow, he's trying his level best to somehow think that, if he uses a particular product, if he scrubs his skin a little more, he's going to look better. And these are all very unfair ways of working with it. And to your second question, why are adolescents more susceptible? This is the age when they see till about 10 years old, most children have an identity which is very, very similar to what the family likes to see them. They're perceived as part of the family. slowly this moves towards what we call the identity crisis, or they're trying to search for who am I. And this identity is something that they want very unique for themselves, something slightly different from their family, more in line with their peers. With the advent of social media and the access to a lot of filters, especially, if you notice, even the peer group is struggling with a lot of body dysmorphia, or selfie dysmorphia. Dysmorphia is basically a faulty perception of the body. So in that sense, what is really happening with a lot of children is that, the ideals are becoming higher and higher, and I'm not able to match that. And also in the teen years, the body is going through a huge growth spurt, a lot of changes, things that they're not able to make sense of. And there's also something called the imaginary audience that most teenagers go through. Most teenagers believe that 50 to 500 people are always watching them. And therefore, a lot of these things become more pronounced than they actually are, which is why, as therapists, we find it more difficult now to deal with the number of cases seeking help.
बिल्कुल, थैंक यू आरती। और सही आपने कहा कि लड़के लड़कियां दोनों ही इस दौर से मुश्किल पैमानों से गुजरते हैं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।